Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 20th of November 2023. Let's get straight to where we normally start, the military aid and other assistance segment. I'm going to start with US congressional leaders hope to pass the additional aid package for Ukraine and Israel before Christmas. So there's talks about this going on after Thanksgiving, so that's going to be coming up this week, and then that will lead on to hopefully the aid being sanctioned before Christmas. So we've got a month to get that sort of sorted out. Goodness me, it's taking so long. Quote here from Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader, Democrat, says, "I know that both sides have a genuine interest in approving aid to Israel and Ukraine, as well as providing assistance to innocent civilians in Gaza." Interesting that Gaza is then being brought on with Israel there to appease both sides of that coin. Let's hope that they do get that sorted. Right, Western air defense has turned Kiev into the safest place in Ukraine, according to Politico. Defenses are reinforced by German Geopol system from Germany and American Avenger systems that shoot down drones and cruise missiles. So they're your short-range ones. The Avengers are basically Humvees with man-pads on top. Normally the man-portable air defense systems, the Stingers, the American Stingers, they are loaded in multiple pods on top of Avengers, so that's what they do. Gepards are the autocannons firing into the air. And then at medium range, Ukraine uses Min-23 Hawks, so those old school systems that have been upgraded but are pretty obsolete these days, but really useful still for taking out the kind of stuff that they were designed to take out. Or can take out. And then NASAMS, that's the national, the American and Norwegian medium-range air defense system, and a German IRST SLM. The SLS version, that is a short range, but the IRST SLM is a useful medium-range system. Very good. And then the long-range defense is provided by Patriot PAC-3s, the most recent iteration, and Eurosam SAMP-T supplied by France and Italy. Those are really decent bits of kit as well. So as I've said before, Kiev, nothing seems to get through Kiev, but you don't want to go announcing this because it's kind of like inviting fate. But, or tempting fate. Kiev certainly is the safest place in Ukraine, as you would imagine it is and should be, because it's the capital and has all those high-value targets of all the infrastructure that allows Ukraine to keep working. Even if you move them out to somewhere like Lviv, then Lviv becomes a new target. So you've got to protect somewhere as your main hub, and that is Kiev. The unfortunate thing there is, or at least the I guess the ramifications of doing that would be that certain other places that really desperately need some of that air defense kit don't have it. You've got to put it somewhere. But if you pile on all your best stuff in Kiev, then you can maybe overdoing it a little bit for Kiev, and you could take maybe one of those systems out, put it over there. That's the kind of trade-off that the government will be discussing all the time. But as they get more and more kit in, then it should be able to be redirected or directed to somewhere else, preferably somewhere near the front line. I keep talking about how I'd really like decent long-range air defenses near Zaporizhia or near Kherson to allow them to allow the Ukrainians to do some effective maneuvers around there, to use their air force to help support their maneuvers, so on and so forth. So I think as time goes on, you'll start to see things being placed near Odessa a lot more to protect the grain export and storage from the ports around Odessa, Danube, but also up near Kherson and Zaporizhia. I think those are your main kind of areas to see further air defense systems put. Ukrainian driver, and then of course you've still got places like Kharkiv to think about. Ukrainian driver, or Turkish MRAP here, the 35th Brigade of Marines on one surviving wheel was able to take Ukrainian soldiers out of the Russian fire in the Zaporizhia direction. So this is a pretty hairy video of a vehicle, an MRAP, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle. So these are fairly decent vehicles in terms of survivability. They're designed to be able to survive IEDs and mines on the road, but this gets what looks to be a remote mine, but it could also be an ATGM fired at it, all sorts of stuff fired at it, and then it gets through and then comes back. Also playing really loud music, which is distracting for the enemy. And you can see it survives pretty well intact. I mean, this is a sort of vehicle that, yep, get some new tires on that bad boy, and it's going to be usable again. This is the value of Western supplied kit. This is probably a Kirpi, a Turkish mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle. It translates as hedgehog. I think it's that one. It might be something else, but could be. They have Cobras as well. It's a survivability that this offers to, or these bits of kit offer to the Ukrainian soldiers. Soldiers can live to fight another day. Yep, the vehicles might not survive these impacts, although this one looks in pretty good nick, all things considered. They often don't survive, and you think, oh, that's a shame that's been taken out, but it does what it's designed to do, which is take the impact of those munitions, but at the enabling the people inside to survive. Okay, a Leopard 1 here. Is this the first video footage we've seen of an active Leopard 1 inside Ukraine? Could well be, but good to see these in Ukraine. There's a Leopard 1. Someone driving past it. Don't know where. There are a number of Leopard 1s still due to hit Ukraine. 100, I think, are due to come from different manufacturers. I say different because Rheinmetall have got a contract to do 32 in total, but the main battle tank variant, 25 of them. But that leaves 75 at least still. I don't know if that 25 was on top of the 100 or is part of the 100 that are due to be delivered over time to Ukraine, and it must be another manufacturer that's refurbishing those and doing them up. But yeah, they are due to get a whole bunch of them. Right, Ukraine will increase the number of mobile groups to fight against Iranian Shaheeds. Alexei Kuleba, the foreign minister, noted that such groups have proven their effectiveness by effectively protecting energy and civil facilities. You're seeing a lot of these. I showed you a video of these driving down the road. You're seeing a lot more of these being produced and finding their way into Ukraine. These are going to be fairly cheap ways of helping to fight off those Shaheeds. Just whack a heavy machine gun or similar onto the back of an SUV rather than trying to procure some expensive military piece of kit that effectively will do the same job. It's going to be about relaying target acquisition data to these vehicles. So as long as you've still got active radar and whatnot, rather than just have these sitting out looking in the sky, hoping that a Shahid's going to drive across their field of vision, that may be what they do as well. But you'd hope that it's a little bit more high tech than that. However, I do wonder sometimes, because you get these Shaheeds that end up flying right across Ukraine and then hitting places in Lviv, and you think they haven't been picked up by radar. They've been able to get that far because that's the entire width of the country there. So I don't know, maybe there are an awful lot of vehicles just doing that, just visually looking in the sky and listening out. This is why it's important that the Russians, it's important that they develop newer versions of the drones that are quieter. We've heard that there's a new quieter version of the Shahed. Doesn't sound like a oversized moped flying through the sky, because that enables target acquisition for people just doing that, looking up, listening, and seeing what they can hit. So I don't know, I'm sure experts in that field will put their comments in the threads below. Okay, this is happening regardless of Ukrainian shell stocks. The more Ukraine uses drones for artillery counter battery, the less shells Ukraine, or the fewer shells Ukraine will need to win. This is something that I've talked about a number of times recently, concerning the substitution of drones for counter battery fire. So, or just shelling. The use of artillery is dependent on the stocks of shells that the Ukrainians have, and if they have more drones than they have shells, then you need to use drones to do the work that shells do, and they are doing that, and arguably doing it more more efficiently. It'll be interesting comparison there to see the strike data, the success um, uh, success percentage of FPV drones or these kinds of drones compared to shells. And then you've got obviously different types of shells. You'll have different types of artillery as well. I mean, there'll be lots of data to compare there. Ideally. Anyway, Samuel Bender, who's a bit of a drone expert, says Ukraine's drone production capacity could exceed Russia's thanks to the support of Western partners, Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Yuri Ignat said on national television. Now, I'd like to know the details of this because I would have, and it could be erroneous, but I would have the it seems to me that Ukraine is producing or getting hold of, big difference there, getting hold of more drones than Russia because of projects like United 24. So United 24 has raised $350 million to procure drones and train drone operators and get drone kits, including vehicles out there to do all this stuff. Is this talking about indigenous production within Ukraine with the help of external partners? And I think that is significant because it talks to this idea of sustainability. But I hope that's what it means, rather than as a whole, Ukraine might be able to, could get to a point where it's building or getting hold of more drones than Russia. I hope that they're already in that position. So production of drones, sustainable indigenous production of drones is going to be so important, as is all indigenous manufacturing capability, to allow Ukraine to commit to this war long term themselves and not rely so heavily on external entities. And sticking on drones, this is fascinating. Something we've heard of before. We've seen reports on this and footage of, say, Chinese drone companies being able to do this has been in the pipeline. This is a drone mothership dropping FPV drones in a Russian rear to strike 20 to 30 kilometers deep. Quote, the Ukrainian armed forces are using tactics with master drones for FPV drones. The FPV with a heavier charge applies to the mother drone, Baba Yaga type, at maximum distance and height, after which the FPV disappears and flies towards the target. The mother drone also acts as a repeater. This way the drone saves battery and flies over a longer distance. The weight of the warhead increases. In recent days, reports about FPV strikes in our rear, 20 to 30 kilometers from the front line, have become more frequent. A regular FPV flies 5 to 8 kilometers. This is huge. Okay, so what's going on here? The way I understand it is you have these really big octocopters like that. You can see it there in the corner, hopefully. I don't know if my face is in the way just a little bit there. Let's play it on. Okay, so you've got that octocopter with a whole bunch of drones attached to the bottom, and this apparently allows those drones to hold bigger warheads because they're not able to fly so far and drain the battery. They can take bigger warheads, and the octocopter drops them near to where they need to hit their targets. So they go off and fire at the targets, and then add a little bit extra range to where this octocopter's got to. And so that's allowing them to strike 20 to 30 kilometers behind enemy lines. It's an incredible increase in capability that we're seeing. And that allows them also to hit with bigger warheads as well. And this octocopter acts as a repeater, which means that you get better footage and all sorts and communication. So anyway, here we have that octocopter dropping off drones, and that drone then going off to find another target or a target. So here, I guess it's going to look at taking out that excavator. No, we don't get to see that. So it flies off. I don't know whether this is training footage, to be perfectly honest. So anyway, that is super, super important. It should work great for ambushes, says someone here, because the master drone flies high as a relay. The FPV link shouldn't suffer from ground shadow effect, so they can land the FPV near the target and shut off the motors, which we've also heard about. So we've heard from Russian sources that are using these kind of ambush tactics. yet maintain control. Then restart the first-person view only when ready to engage. Added bonus, crystal clear videos all the way to impact. So good video footage, but also just the capability that allows for the Ukrainians, and it saves on battery, etc., etc. The Israelis have a similar system, Rotom M. It's more powerful though. What I love about it is its ability to perch itself on a hill and remain passive while it quietly observes the surroundings. It can be quickly activated when a target of opportunity appears. So this might, I mean, I don't know whether that whole octocopter can go and hang around behind a hill, just settle down, use its video camera, not use its batteries or whatever to fly, and then activate when it sees some targets, take off and release these FPV drones that then go and take out the targets. I think this is great. However, one has to worry that the Russians can quickly follow suit here, which is why I have this one next that says, and this is from the Speaker of the Ground Forces Command, everything that the Armed Forces of Ukraine successfully uses is immediately adopted by the Russians and used against us. I mean, you would completely expect this. The war is not against the poor or the homeless. This is a well-trained army with a large human resource. Russia is very capable still of looking to see what the Ukrainians are doing, taking those ideas, producing those things themselves or getting them from China or whatever, and then using them against the Ukrainians. And unfortunately, every good thing that Ukrainians do, a great use of technology, is able to be matched by the Russians, because we're living in an age where, you know, that kind of stuff is that kind of tech is freely available. There's a kind of level playing field, isn't there? So the advantage that one side needs over the other side is just scale. And I think that, going back to drone and drone production, but this idea that United 24 have pumped that much money into this Army of Drones project to allow the Ukrainians just 1,500 drones a week or whatever it is going to the front lines. And they'll still complain it's not enough. You'll still have units saying we don't have enough drones. But I'm guessing that they have that scale advantage over the Russians. So while the Russians can conceivably match the Ukrainians in these kind of areas, the question is, can they match the scale? And also that goes the other way, so that when the Ukrainians see the Russians are doing something, can they match the scale of the Russians? So the big obvious scale difference is artillery ammunition, and obviously both sides are now vying to keep ahead of the other side in terms of production and acquisition of ordnance. Okay, here is a new Iranian loitering munition. I don't know anything about it, but it looks very much like a switchblade type loitering munition to me. And again, this is the challenge of having these nefarious actors on the side of Russia, like Iran, North Korea. They have no shortage of people, particularly Iran, it seems, people working on this stuff to create new products, even though they're heavily sanctioned. And that leads to this kind of axis of evil that gives the Russians these new capabilities every now and again that hopefully the Ukrainians can either match or be ahead of in terms of production, design and production. Talking about that axis, we've got North Korean ammunition being reported to have a 4% failure rate. So what does that work out? I think for 1 million shells, that would be 40,000 shells being dud or problematic. Now, if that failure rate also includes shells that can cause the barrel to explode, then that would be significant, because it's not just the shell rate, the shell dud rate, but it's the impact on the actual artillery. The most common is a poor fit between the barrel and shell. So if the shell is slightly smaller than the barrel, then it allows explosive gases to get around the edge, and that causes all sorts issue to allowing gases to escape through the gap. This can result in catastrophic barrel failure. Apparently, North Korea delivered 1 million of these beauties, so 40,000. If that can translate, even I don't know, even if 1 in 100 of those 40,000 can cause barrel failure, catastrophic barrel failure, then isn't it? I accidentally reported the other day that the Ukrainians had these. I think I got confused. No, it's the Russians that have got these. So these are the Desert Cross 1003s. These are these small, very light Jeeps. And I was saying the Ukrainians possibly getting these across a river. No. This is a Chinese Jeep that they are getting en masse to Russia. And I guess they're getting around this with the idea that they're not military vehicles, right? They're just, light Jeeps. Hey, you can use them for whatever you like, baking cakes, whatever. But no. So 500 in December of 2023, 1,090 in the first quarter of 2024. They'll be adapted to Russian conditions, heaters, soft salon, it says here, reinforced bumpers, etc., etc. It's a real challenge, and they are already evident on the front line. So here's a video that I probably can't really show you, but it's in the Staromelnivka area, which is in the Velika Novosilka salient, and you've got one here. I think it actually reverses over someone, and then drives off. This is evidence on footage that's already been captured. These vehicles are being used by the Russians on the front lines in Ukraine. Now, if that's not China giving military equipment to Ukraine, I don't know what is. Anyway, on to geopolitical stuff, and goodness, there's quite a bit to talk about in terms of what's happened. So, first of all, this... Well, he's quite energetic. So he's this libertarian. Where do you place him? So a lot of people are saying he's a far right leader, but he's also an extreme libertarian. So what does libertarian means for those who don't know? A libertarian, in terms of politics rather than philosophy, is someone who wants very small government, that wants to basically have virtually no government, or no government, so in the extreme kind of forms of libertarianism, so that the individual is the god. This is kind of the thinking of Ayn Rand, and that you as the individual shouldn't have state interference on you, right? So a lot of people like the idea of this, but it kind of is in its extreme forms just doesn't work. Like when your house is on fire, do you know what? It'd be kind of nice if the fire brigade came to help you out. Who's going to pay for the fire brigade? Other than that, you're going to have to stand around with buckets of water. So do you know what I mean? There needs to be a sensible amount of state interference, no matter what you think. I mean, I think extreme libertarian. You get what I call faux libertarians, and this happens an awful lot. Now, if you look at someone like Ayn Rand with Atlas Shrugged, she was a first generation Russian immigrant, illegal immigrant, I think it was initially, illegal immigrant coming to America, who was interestingly an atheist, interestingly like pro-abortion, all these kind of things. So you get a lot of American libertarians who say, yeah, and will hold up. Paul Ryan, I remember, famously held up Ayn Rand's book, but like doesn't adhere to half of what Ayn Rand is or believed in. So true libertarians believe in freedom of movement of people. So immigration is not an issue. Like you cannot stop people moving from one place to another. It's the fundamental freedom. So it's really difficult to be a proper libertarian for many libertarians, because you will find that many libertarians will say, but we need really strong borders and we need to stop people moving and we shouldn't have immigration or illegal immigration, so on and so forth. So I said, okay, so who's going to enforce those borders? What does a nation state mean if you're just individuals? So there's a real tension with a lot of proper libertarian thinkers and the reality of living in nation states, right? And so the reality is you need to operate somewhere in the middle there. Anyway, I digress. What am I talking about this for? Because you've got this chap, Javier Milei, who's just been elected to the new president of Argentina. I talked about him before, and it looks like he wasn't going to get through the initial nomination processes, and he did, and he now is president, and he is nuts. President-elect Javier Milei singing about the economic crisis of Argentina, dressed as General Ancamp, his superhero alter ego. Now, I guess when this guy... Yeah, you might like that kind of stuff. You might think, oh, thank goodness, something different from the usual political stuff. Anyway, he is now president. Argentina, says the Guardian, presidential election, far-right libertarian Javier Milei wins after rival concedes. So Javier Milei, a volatile far-right libertarian who has vowed to exterminate inflation and take a chainsaw to the state, has been elected president of Argentina, catapulting South America's second-largest economy into an unpredictable and potentially turbulent future. It continues later. During his campaign, Milei, who will take office on the 10th of December, vowed to abolish the central bank, to dollarize the economy in order to overcome a financial calamity that has left 40% of Argentina's 45 million citizens in poverty and pushed inflation to more than 140%. So in other words, he's going to get rid of the peso and get the American dollar in. I know how to exterminate the cancer of inflation, Milei proclaimed during last Sunday's final presidential debate. Interestingly, which most pundits seem to think he lost, which most pundits believe Massa had won. Milei's victory was celebrated by other big beasts of the global far right, including Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro, who had championed his campaign and had promised to attend his inauguration. Quote, "A hope is sparkling in South America once again," Bolsonaro wrote on X, hailing what he called a victory for honesty, progress, and freedom. Former US President Donald Trump wrote, "The whole world is watching. I'm very proud of you. You will turn your country around and truly make Argentina great again." His victory was also celebrated by X's owner Elon Musk, who posted, "Prosperity is ahead for Argentina." Some of the left-wing people around the world not being so positive. Milei's left-wing opponents reacted with shock and dejection to the election of a notoriously erratic figure whose radical ideas include legalizing the sale of organs, cutting ties with Argentina's two biggest trade partners. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? This guy isn't... Well, he is unpredictable, and he has views that are, in one sense, like really erratic, in another sense, quite consistent. So he is a proper libertarian. Well, if he is a proper libertarian, I mean, he has got some interesting views around the whole gamut of views, but then you would hope he would be dead against things like the authoritarianism of China and Russia. Well, it turns out he is. So the new president of Argentina, Javier Milei, is strongly pro-Ukrainian. He is also very much pro-Israel and will move Argentina's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Cool. Now that's an interesting one, because Israel as a state is arguably stopping other people having the freedom of self-determination and freedom of movement in terms of Gaza. So there are contradictions going on all over the place here. However, interesting that he is cutting ties with Argentina's two biggest trade partners, Brazil. So Brazil was wanting to go into a trade partnership with Argentina, kind of against BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and create a separate currency that wasn't the dollar, American dollar, do trade in South America. Well, actually, he is going against that and saying we're going to cut ties with Brazil and China, closing more than a dozen ministries as well. So a dozen ministries, like state ministries, he's just going to close them down. He's also a climate denier. He's a climate denying populist who is known by the nickname El Loco, the Madman, who also enraged millions of Argentinians by questioning the 4-decade consensus over the crimes of the 1976 to 83 dictatorship. So that would be Pinochet, I guess, during which an estimated 30,000 people were killed by the military regime. His vice presidential running mate is Victoria Villarruel, an ultra-conservative congresswoman who has played down the dictatorship since. So this is really controversial. It's playing around with science, it's playing around with history, right, to create their own narrative. And he may be a libertarian, although he has got very conservative views in some areas. But if he's got an ultra-conservative congresswoman being his number two, then I doubt it's going to be the kind of libertarianism that you might hope for if you were truly a libertarian. Quote, he is way more excessive and unstable than Bolsonaro and Trump. So it's highly unpredictable that what this person could do in power. Federico Finkelstein, an Argentinian historian who studies the global far right, said on the eve of Sunday's election. Benjamin Gedan, the head of Wilson Center's Argentina project, said he believed one word explained the scale of Milei's victory: desperation. And I would agree there. So we've seen this in hyperinflation in Germany. What happened? Hitler happened. Hyperinflation in Argentina. What happens? This guy happened. So desperation leads to extreme measures to try and overcome that desperation. It's going to be really interesting to see where this goes. He is, as an understatement, rather interesting figure. Now, the far right is making moves around the other areas of the world. So here we have in the Netherlands, in Holland, Geert Wilders' Party for Freedom, PVV, which is an anti-immigration kind of far-right party, is gaining in the polls again, and it is going to be almost certainly a reaction against immigration, which is a challenge to a lot of European nations. Nothing per se to do with the EU. You could argue that they aren't being unified enough or strong, but a lot of countries within the EU are going to be suffering from, not suffering, is that a loaded word, they will be challenged by huge numbers of immigrants from outside of Europe, from North Africa, from the Middle East. So when you have war, when you've got financial instability, when you've got climate, so there is this new phenomenon of climate migration, and that will increase over time. And when you're getting certain areas that are just not livable, can't sustain numbers of people due to war and climate, etc., then you're going to get masses of migration. That is going to put pressure on countries from a point of view of borders, but also from point of view of infrastructure, etc. And what happens is usually the far right prevail because they are very strong on migration, obviously. Speaking of far right rhetoric, Trump has got into a bit of trouble, although he might not see it as trouble. But he has been talking about exterminating vermin. As the Illinois governor here says, deeply concerned by Trump rhetoric reminiscent of the Nazi era. I don't know where it's going with Donald Trump. What I can tell you is that the things he talks about are frightening to those of us who know the history of Europe in the 30s and 40s. I'm deeply concerned about his predilection for revenge. It's really important. So he has announced pretty publicly that he's basically going to get revenge for anyone who was remotely to do with anti-Trumpism or in the judiciary. And he's basically, think of all the court cases he's been involved in. If he gets into power, he will essentially be dictatorial. And this is a real worry, that kind of revenge streak that he has in him. We know he has that in him. So anyway, and what that will mean for groups of people who didn't support him in the 2024 election if he gets elected. Right, employing words like vermin to describe anyone who makes use of their basic right to criticize the government echoes dictators like Hitler and Mussolini, White House spokesperson Andrew Bates said during a press briefing last week. Quote, using terms like that about dissent would be unrecognizable to our founders, but horrifyingly recognizable to American veterans who put on their country's uniform in the 1940s and defeated the Axis powers, which included forces from Hitler's Germany and Mussolini's Italy during the Second World War. It's, worrying moves around the world. And talking about migration, Finnish military is building fences at the Russian border. So the Finnish military will help border guards erect fences near Kumo, a town near the Russian border, amid concern about migrants crossing from Russia, the Finnish broadcasting company reported. So I talked about how Russia's doing what Belarus has done around the Baltics and Poland, which is to motivate even to pay illegal migrants to go to the border and get across the border in order to render those countries more unstable. About social cohesion here. So recent developments in Finland. Over the past few days, Russia has sent an increasing number of migrants, has sent these migrants to Finland's borders. Finland has closed several border crossing points due to authorities' threat assessment. A video surfaced of the Russian operation. So check this out. Here we see just people without any stuff with them particularly, not going with an awful lot on these very cold, in these very cold areas, going towards the Finnish border. Just an hugely increased number of migrants here, and this car journey just kind of takes you through that. You get towards the Finnish border, so on and so forth. Anyway, so Emil Castelhelmi here says the video stops roughly about 50 kilometers from the Finnish border. The people are moving towards Finland. The operation is orchestrated by Russian authorities. These people couldn't move in the border control zone if the Russians wouldn't let them. Russia is bringing the migrants near. So there you can see a vehicle is bringing the migrants near the border control zone where they are given bikes. So you can see the bikes in the back of the vehicles. From that video, they have to cycle to the border. It's a bureaucracy thing. In the video, you can see bikes being unloaded from the vehicle. There are no Russians trying to cross the border. They're sending people without necessary travel documents from countries like Yemen, Somalia, and Syria. Russia is taking advantage of poor people in the middle of winter in freezing temperatures. The Finnish Defence Forces has also started construction activities at the border. The construction of temporary barriers and obstacles has begun at the Vartias border station. Russia's goal is to cause instability at the border and in wider society. In addition, there may be persons with questionable backgrounds among the migrants. Finland is ready to close the whole eastern border if needed. And indeed, Pekka Kallioniemi has done a whole thread on this as well. Harsh winter's coming. Russia wants the illegal migrants it has deliberately transferred to the border with Finland to freeze to death there. Russia makes a mockery of European humanitarianism because it treats Europe like an enemy. So, yeah, this is, again, it's worth going into this now. I'll probably do that in an extra if I have time. I have so much stuff to talk about in my extras that I just don't have a chance to do as often as I'd like. But anyway, this is another big thread on that from Pekka Kallioniemi. We'll return to this. Anyway, let's go on. Solovyov, so the Russian propagandist Solovyov, is so angry, that's him there, is so angry with Xi's meeting with Biden. The President Xi of China met with Biden in San Francisco recently that he started attacking China, stating Russia is ahead of Chinese technology. Why should we idolize China? What houses in China have heating? And how many have a pension? He said. So this is interesting. We like to sit back and eat the popcorn when these two lovers start arguing in public, and hopefully a divorce will follow suit. I mean, it's a relationship that none of us want to succeed. Right, Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin has arrived in Kyiv. This is to, solidify that relationship. It's a very public meeting where he is being strong on the messaging there. So good stuff. Ramstein is to happen soon. So let's hope that lots of good news comes out of his meeting in Kyiv. Polish truck drivers do not allow humanitarian aid to pass the border. The Deputy Minister of Community Development, Territories and Infrastructure of Ukraine, Serhiy Derkach, reports the official noted that this statement about the alleged passage by Polish drivers of vans with humanitarian aid and with dangerous goods does not correspond to reality. We have recorded numerous facts when tankers with fuel and humanitarian aid stand in queues, he says. This is a real worry. Now, there are alternative routes through other countries that I'm sure will be being used now, but this is not cool. That needs to be sorted out as soon as possible. A Japanese delegation visits Kyiv, pledges $175 million for reconstruction. The delegation of Japanese officials and business representatives, including the Foreign Minister Kyoto Chuchi, Industry Minister Kazuchika Iwata, and members of the Kaidanren, Japan's largest business lobby, arrived in Kyiv on November the 20th to meet with Ukrainian officials ahead of the reconstruction conference that Japan will host. This is good news. Japan is a huge international player. It'd be great if they can get involved there. So here we see Shmihal meeting with them, the Prime Minister. Fantastic. Hopefully Japan can play an active role in the financing of reconstruction. And there you have it. That's today's geopolitics and military aid news video. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. Thank you for those of you who help with membership, with Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal and all that kind of stuff. Really great. Please check out the live stream tonight with Exit on maritime matters, and a future live stream with Jessica Arrow on trolls that I'm hoping to sort out ASAP. Russian trolls and Russian disinformation warfare. Take care, speak soon.